Okay, so now we're going to get away from strings for a little bit and look at our array algorithms. And we're going to do some array chunking, which is basically breaking an array down into smaller arrays. So let's create a new folder, and I'm going to call it array. We'll call it array chunk. And then inside that, let's create array chunk.js. And let's create array chunk.test.js. Now I'm going to switch it up a bit, and we're going to use the assertion library from that Node.js includes. So it's a core Node.js module called assert, and we're going to use it with jest. So basically, we can just replace expects with the with assert. Okay, and an assertion is a statement that is either true or false. If it's false, then the program will throw an error, and we can use assert.equal or assert.deep equal. There's a whole bunch of different methods, just like you would use with expects. And I'm only doing this to show you that there's so many different ways that you can write this stuff. So I'm going to bring in assert, and it's in the Node.js standard library, so we don't have to install it or anything. We just say require assert. And then let's bring in our function. I'm going to call it chunk, and that's going to be from the /array chunk file. So we're going to say describe, and for the description, we'll just say array chunking. Okay, and I'll explain what that is as we write the test. So in the function here, we're going to have it, and instead of, actually, let's just write the description here. We'll say should implement, or let's say should create chunks of a specific size. Okay, now instead of doing expects like we have been doing, we're going to say assert and then dot, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different methods here. So deep equal, deep strict equal, does not match, does not reject. We're going to use deep equal. And we want to pass in here our function, which is going to be called chunk. That takes in an array. So the array I'm going to pass in is just 1 through 4. Now chunk is going to take in a second argument of basically the number of elements that I want in each chunk, which I'm going to say 2 for this one. Now after the chunk function, we put a comma, and this is what we should get. Okay, so this is what it should be equal to, or the output should be equal to, which is going to be an array that has chunks of 2. So the first one would be 1, 2. Then we'd have 3, 4. Okay, so this array in chunks of 2 would be this. Now we can do another assertion here, and let's say this one we want to be 3. In that case, we'd have chunks of 3. Now since we only have 1 through 4 in the array, the second chunk would only have 4 in it. Okay, if we added 5 and 6, 5 and 6 would get added here. If we added 7, that would be another array with 7 in it, because it needs to be chunks of 3. So I hope that makes sense. So that's our test. Now we're going to create the solution, and I'm going to use an arrow function just to kind of change things up. So this is going to take in the array and then the size of the chunks, or the size of the subarrays. Okay, and we're going to initialize a variable called chunked to an empty array, and that's ultimately what we're going to return. So let's loop through the given array. I'm going to use a for of, so we'll say let's say element of array. So the array that is being passed in. Then I'm going to get the last element. So let's say const last equals, and the last element of the chunked array. All right, and we can do that by passing in as an index chunked.length -1. So -1, that will give us the last element of the chunked array. Then we want to check to see if it's not last, right? As long as it's not last, or last.length is if last.length is equal to size, then we're going to add a new chunk. So we do that by taking the chunked array, and we want to push on the chunk. So we're going to pass in some brackets here and then the element. Else, then we're just going to add to the chunk that's already there. So we can do that by just saying last.push and pass in just the element. All right, and then after the for loop, we're going to return chunked. That should do it. So let's come down here. Let's say module, I cannot type, module.exports, and we're exporting chunked. So now let's run our test. And it looks like we have one that failed. Actually, I'm sorry, the name of the function is chunk, not chunked. So let's run that again. All right, so now all of our tests pass. Okay, so kind of a tough one. There's other ways you can do it as well. In the next video, we're going to look at anagrams.